Defund the police means reallocating or redirecting funding away from the police department to other government agencies funded by the local municipality. And defund does not mean abolish policing, and even some who say it is that abolish, it does not necessarily mean to do away with law enforcement altogether. And rather, we want to see the rotten trees of policing chopped down and fresh roots replanted new. And different from abolishing, defunding police highlights fiscal responsibility and advocates for a market-driven approach to taxpayer money and has some potential benefits that will reduce police violence and crimes. And before I jump into my argument on why we are disagree to these motions and we choose to defunding the police, I would like to give some response to the proposition side of the House arguments. And the first thing is the first point that they are glorifying is that about they want to take proportionally principles, which is they want to re-educate the police requirement, and they want to give some police and racism education, and they want to require the police diversely, which we think their mechanism is not will not gonna be working since since the fact that in the status quo right now, especially in the United States, the crimes or the police abusement and violence is still increasing, which is almost is increasing, and that's why we think if they keep like reforming this police abuse and misconduct, it will still spending more budget for something that is will not necessarily end by the police. And then they also justify about morally justifications, which is society's rights versus security, and that is why we think since the society have a rights for security, we want to defunding the police and give back this funding to the society, so this society will get their rights that they don't really get since because of the funding is given more to the police department. And also the third point is that they say that the fund is reducing police system, while we think as the opposition side of the house, defunding the police will be fix the police system, which is I will explain later in my argument. And now before starting this debate, I would like to characterizing the characteristic of the funding is that it is come from the daily income from the taxpayer, civilians, and so on. And then those fundings is mostly being used by the government to fund the police departments. So the police even got funded until 100 billion of dollars, which is 97% is comes from the regular salaries and allowance, also tax, and it is not worth significantly by the works or the police procedure as the state apparatus, and it is we think it is too much for the police and not comparable by their less work to decrease the crimes. And that is why we think the society have more right to get that funding rather than the police. And now, why we think pushing for institutional reform to address police abuse and misconduct is not working, because for years until the current situations, the police brutality seems like don't have an end, and if the proposition proposed to fix the police misconducts, which still funding the police, will in the end just such a waste of money, because the fact that it is still giving a bad outcome towards the society, and it is not working on the status quo since the police brutality is getting worse and their work is not significant with the funding. And it is such a waste for money from the government to funding the police until the military, if in the end their work doesn't worth all of the fund that given by the government. And that is why defunding is a better solution than we as the opposition will propose. And now why is defunding is more effective? Because by doing a defunding, in essence, we want that the public budgets that is allocated to the police and prisons is reduced, and better the budget is diverted to strengthen other public services. And for us, the state's budget for public security is better spent on housing, public health, education, job creation, and other vital programs that on the budget for the police and law enforcement. Because we believe that if public services can be improved, so all of the citizens can assess their basic needs, and then the crime will also be reduced. And now we believe that a larger social budget for empowering citizens will reduce the condition that allow crime such as poverty, unemployment, mental illness, and homelessness. And this demand can also be a kind of pressure on the police to reform itself, and so that it truly becomes a public service apparatus and no longer acting arbitrarily on behalf of law enforcement. And as in the George Floyd murder case, so we believe if more budget goes to social empowerment and improve quality of life, then the crime will decrease. For example, the proposition brings society's case such as drug dealers, and that's we think it is such an over-policing them, and that is why to decrease that, it is better to fund an institutions to be funded to rehab and giving them education. For example, in the United States, their system are seems like too over-policing, while the fact that there are lack of counseling institutions, which is a basic need that is more important rather than the police, because that is the urgent thing if we want to decrease the crimes. And we are see from the current status quo right now that we see from the pandemic situations where we need more funding to be reallocated to the medical staff and so on. And so many critics comes up about how in the pandemic situation funding reallocation done by the government to the police department is not significantly decreased, while in the other hand so many medical staff around the world, especially in the United States, are complaining about the limited of medical staff's personal protective equipment and other medical equipment, while in the other reality there are thousands of police apparatus who have a complete self-protections and equipment for every protest that is happening in that country. And here we can see how the gaps that is comes out from that case that this pandemic and health sectors is way more important and has sacrificed so many medical staff and fixed them but it's lack of funding for the medical basis for the medical basic needs, while the police job, which have no significantly important job, is getting more funding than the hospital staff, and we think it is not unfair, and that is why we think it is not stable, and that is why we don't want to spoil the police by giving them reform to address their misconduct, and rather we want to defunding the police so that they can fix their system. So in the end, and reallocating those funding to the society so it will reduce crimes and also will fix the police system. That's all from my argument. Thank you.